my name is Paul Michaud, and I'm the CEO of Proceve. Today in this video, we're going to talk about how Proceve handles estimation in the project management context. Inadequate estimation and resource management are the second biggest causes of project failure, behind constantly changing objectives and requirements, which we talked about in a previous video on traceability. So with that in mind, we've spent a fair bit of time sort of designing, what we think is a robust estimation and resource management framework. And we're going to talk about estimation in this video. So typically when we're doing various projects where it involves a lot of human labor, we tend to see common estimation approaches. If you're in the agile world, the most common is to use story points. Other ways are t-shirt sizes or complexity measures. And of course, ultimately, it boils down to person hours. So with that, we've kind of said, okay, if I'm estimating story points, t-shirt sizes, complexity, etc., what's a person really doing when they're making those estimates? How do I decide something's 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 story points, whatever it is? Well, typically in my experience over many, many decades of doing this, if I go to somebody and say, well, how many story points is this going to be? In their head, they're going, how many person hours is this, right? And based on the person hours, they're translating this into what they think the story point equivalent is that their team or project is using consistently as a mapping. And typically, we'll see things like 1 story point is something less than a day. 2 story points might be 1 to 2, even 3 days. 5 story points might be a week, and so on. So at the end of the day, what happens is you essentially have this idea of a mapping, right? In their mind, they're going X person hours equals X story points, or X person hours equals this t-shirt size, or how long is it going to take me to do something, and therefore I'm going to assign it a complexity measure. So with that in mind, we sort of said, okay, we need the concept of a mapping set for estimation. So we said, okay, you can have a set of mappings, and each one sort of maps, story points to t-shirt sizes to complexity to person hours and so on. So if I take 1 story point as an example, that might be equivalent to a triple extra small t-shirt size, an extremely simple complexity, and somewhere between 1 and 6 person hours, with the expected value being, say, 2, and 1 being the low end and 6 being the high end. So inside our software, we actually allow each project to set a whole set of mappings like this. And then you can choose to say, I'm going to use story points, t-shirt sizes, complexity, whatever, and we can actually map it. And each team can actually set these estimation mappings on their own, but it allows us to provide some idea of consistency across the project. And then later on, when we actually measure the time spent on things, we can actually use it to calibrate back and say, okay, were we consistently under, over, on point with our estimates? Over time, as we build up data for your respective teams, we'll be able to actually analytically offer the option to recalibrate these ranges based on past performance, and it'll allow you to have better estimates over time. So, like a lot of other stuff in our system, estimates are themselves can be hierarchical and built up, although we've, basically, if you want, you can have estimates with all kinds of sub-estimates, which can themselves have sub-estimates and so on. In practice, typically, if you're going to do this, you're actually essentially saying that, hey, I've identified subtasks or sub-pieces of work that need to be done. And from a best practice perspective, even though we can allow you to build the estimates up this way, you're actually better to specify those subtasks that you're using to build up the estimates, and then we will actually aggregate those up in order to get to that top level estimate. But in reality, by doing sub-estimates of things, you're essentially identifying sub-bits of work that have to be done, and you're applying the estimate to that typically. So, acknowledge that as best practice and actually specify those sub-pieces of work and therefore supply one estimate against each item. So inside the estimates, They're made up of a number of things. One, they constitute a set of values that we have, whether that's your story points, your t-shirt size, complexity, or person hours. The person hours that they ultimately map to have a low, an expected value, and a high, so we supply a full range for that. In addition, we maintain data structures to allow us to supply costs because at the end of the day, if I'm going to budget for a project, if I'm the senior executive, CIO, whatever, um, I need to know what it's going to cost me. I need to know how long it's going to take. I need to know how many people it's going to take. And I need to know ultimately what am I budgeting cost wise to do this. So correspondingly, based on the estimates of high, low, expected value, we do the same with costing. So costing can apply a low expected value and high range as well. And that derives from also being able to say, well, in my estimate, okay, it's one thing to say I need 10 man hours of time or 10 person hours, but what kind of resources is that? Is that 10 person hours of a BA? Is it 10 person hours of an intern? Is it 10 person hours of my chief architect? And those different resources are going to have different associated costs with them. So by specifying the type of resources that you need, the skills that they need, the experience level, the costing on each of the resources, we can then go, okay, this estimate assumed 10 person hours worth of time, but it assumes a resource of this particular type, skill, experience level, and that comes with a particular cost. And by combining that, then we can actually create the range of cost estimates corresponding to the range of time estimates. In addition, as I mentioned previously, we allow for estimates to be aggregated. So if I've specified a top level task and that task has a bunch of child tasks on it, which may themselves have child tasks, and I've put estimates on each one, then essentially our system will allow you to aggregate all of those estimates from the children, their costs, their values, etc., up into a sub estimate within the top level. So, and it'll show up as an aggregated children. In addition, sometimes even though I've aggregated all the subtasks up, there may be stuff that we haven't specified. There's things that we're still not sure about. There may be pieces of work that we think are out there or we're 100% certain is out there where we simply haven't defined it. So we have this local estimate, which is sort of an amount in excess of that aggregated estimate from the children. And then finally, on each estimate, we also carry sort of an aggregation which totals those. So in theory, for any given estimate, you potentially have the total of all the child tasks, you have the local estimate, and then you have the total of both that local and all the subtasks. And all of that rolls up to the parent estimate and is available, but we allow the different line items to be seen and tracked separately. And so basically that sort of sums up how we deal with the estimates. And these can be applied to every single thing. Estimates can be applied not only just to tasks, but to, what's it going to take to do a requirement? What's it going to take to do a test? What's it going to take for an issue, documents? Every single artifact type inside our system actually allows you to apply an estimate to it. Because at the end of the day, right, unless you're being really, really specific and pedantic, which I rarely see, you're probably not saying, oh, I'm going to make a task for the BA to write this requirement and I'll estimate that task, but not the requirement. So you end up missing stuff. But by this way, we can literally track and record time and supply estimates on every single artifact, whether it's a tester, a QA person, a person doing support, whether it's a BA or an executive, it doesn't matter. It's not just the people actually executing the tasks. If it was a software project, like often only the development time is estimated, but yet BA and project management time, as the data shows, can be as much as 27% of the overhead. So that gets completely missed.